Hi, I'm Frank Gladstone from ASIFA-Hollywood, and we're doing a question and answer with the crew, or the main crew or the top crew, or the above the line crew, whatever, for Croods: The New Age, sometimes called Croods 2. And what we have here is we have our great people. With first Joel Crawford, who's a director. Hi, Joel.
Hi.
Got some things back, and then Mark Swift, Mark, the producer.
Hi.
And then Nate Wragg, the production designer.
Hey.
And then Januel Mercado, Raised by Wolves, who is the head of story. Told you I'd do that. It's true, it's Raised by Wolves. So I want to start by talking about the fact that it's a sequel, of course, from the original Croods, but it's a 7-year bridge, which is usually a pretty long time between a sequel. It happens now and then, but usually it's a year or 2 or 3. And I know there was some back and forth about when it was going to be done, and then there were things happen, and it was political, and a company got sold to another company. So can somebody help, maybe Mark, maybe you help tell me how it finally came to be greenlit and how it evolved like that?
Yeah, you know, as you say, those in those 7 years, DreamWorks got bought and sold, and we became a member of Universal, and different projects stopped and started, and Croods 2 got up a little bit. About 3 years ago, Joel and I were asked to partner up on developing, a new version of Croods 2, and we were very excited because we were both fans of the original movie, like a lot of the team on the show, even though not a lot of us really worked on the first movie. We all came to it as fans, which is a great place to be because you're not sort of so caught up in the history of the show, you're just responding to the things you liked. And so I think that's pretty much how it got up and running.
But they greenlit it at one point early, as I understand it, or it was in production or in development and then it kind of went away, and then it came back, and then Universal did, and then, and eventually, finally, it got greenlit. Now, initially, they had the original directors on it, Kirk and Chris. And
yeah.
I guess what happened there that they switched? Did they just go, you take it, or was it?
Yes, there was a lot of history with this project, and part of that is like the first movie is so beloved, where it's like, okay, it's you're following it up. And I think the studio rightfully was like, okay, it has to be the perfect follow-up to it. And Chris Sanders and Kirk D'Amico were working on it. But like you said, there was, things like company being bought and things like that slowed them down. And so they had both left the studio at the point where Mark and I were approached about picking up the story. So we came in kind of with different ingredients that had already been explored. And our job was to go, okay, many talented people have come before us, especially Chris Sanders and Kirk D'Amico. I'm a big fan of theirs. And to go, what can we use of, that direction, and what do we put of our own mark on this and take it? And one of the nice things early on was Chris Sanders actually came back to the studio, was giving me notes on the script, giving us insights into the characters, and then really kind of just was excited for us to run with it. And so that was a nice handoff in a way from Chris, that from there we kind of, made our own choices on where the story goes.
And then
and I was going to say, Chris jumped in and did the voice of Belt. So we were really happy to continue to have his voice as, on this beloved character he developed. So that was
I was going to say, I noticed in the cast, actually, I noticed a few people on the crew that appear in the cast. I think Januel, you're in the movie for a voice, and I think that also Joel, you're in, aren't you, as well as Guy's father. As the dad, you have like 3 lines at the beginning, but still,
My big reveal.
Wow. Were there other guys, but since we've got into that, were there other people in the crew that showed up in the movie as voices? I know Mark didn't, because you don't want anybody with a British accent.
No, I struggle. I tried to insert a British character in it for 3 years, and just every time Joel would bat me back. Jim Ryan, who is the Frank, you know well, the editor, he does a few voices. And Ryan, who worked in editorial, he also did a voice. So yeah, sometimes, as people know, people come in and do temp voices and just to get the story explored and keep us going. And then after a while, you just get used to that voice and you really like it. And then that's how most people end up in the movie. Yeah.
Right. I remember when that started back in the day, Mark, when we were young and callow. Well, I was older. I think it was Pinocchio in Shrek. It was Pinocchio, and a couple of the other guys ended up, because they would pitch those crazy voices and ended up having to get SAG cards.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing where you're, especially like Mark's saying, when you're working on the movie and you know the needs of it, and you find that, and then sometimes we bring people in and it's just, it doesn't capture the same thing. So you go, let's keep what we had.
Yeah. So I noticed that the main Croods, the family, came back and are basically all the same actors, Nicolas Cage and Emma Stone and all those guys are all in. But you had new characters that had to come in as well because you've introduced the other family. So what happened? Were they the people you thought of initially? And then I'm going to get to some story about that as well. But was it an easy casting or was it hard?
I gotta say, it was already from the beginning. We inherited such an amazing cast from the first movie that are just this amazing voice talent. And then, so really in our casting, we were looking for someone who can stand up comedically and emotionally to, like your Nick Cage, Emma Stone, Ryan Reynolds, Catherine Keener, Cloris Leachman, or Clark Duke also. That they're amazing. And so we were like, that's a high bar. One of the cool things, Leslie Mann was actually already attached from the previous version. And we just love Leslie. She is so talented, so funny, and a great partner to work with in creating the character. So we had her and we're like, we're not letting her go. And then we brought in Peter Dinklage, who felt like the perfect kind of counterpart to Grug, to play the other father of the Bettermans.
Right.
And specifically with Dawn, we held auditions, with a bunch of talented actresses. And when we heard Kelly Marie Tran, when she came in, we just knew she was our Dawn.
Now the picture started with two other directors, and then it stopped, and by the time it started again, it was a different crew. And I know there was an original story, and I'm going to address this to Januel as well. I mean, were there storyboards from the original idea that you got first, or was it kind of brand new when stories started? You're muted.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, you're good.
Oh, we're good. I think in terms of boards, we were starting from scratch, but they had like the general structure of like two families meeting each other, and then the rivalry between the two dads. So there were like relationships and dynamics that we were like studying and looking at for reference, and then but for the most part, the basic seeds were there, but like our execution was pretty much like our own take. Would you say, Joel, Mark, Nate?
Yeah, especially I think when in changing, those characters, the characters kind of changed in terms of the other family they met. And so trust me, I would love to reuse whatever work I could because it's a lot of work forming these stories. But we started everything over from scratch in that way.
Well, what about that goes to this, and I want to talk to Nate about that. So you had assets from the original picture and designs from the original pictures and characters and so forth. So you had some assets, but how much of those could you reuse, and how much of those had to be built from scratch, so designed and then built that you couldn't use? Well, you had a whole other land that you had to design, of course, but what did you start off with? What was in the package that you could start off with that you didn't have to go back to?
Well, I think the way Mark sort of put it was we got to kind of start off with keeping anything that we liked from the first movie in terms of tone and visuals. It had been 7 years since the characters had come back up to the big screen, so we were going to have to redo a lot just because of technology, and the advancements that we would make and across all departments. So really what we tried to focus on was making sure that the characters felt iconically familiar, but also updated to be able to tell this story that we wanted to tell. And you know, in a lot of ways, it's a sequel that and it starts basically and explores all new stuff the entire time.
Right.
So while we tried to again use things that were iconically familiar to the prehistoric landscape, it's really all much like, you know, Januel was mentioning from a story perspective. It's all new stuff that we got to, you know, kind of take the best of what we wanted moving forward.
And I saw, you know, to kind of bring people up to speed, there's that little cartoon at the beginning of her diary of where you kind of quickly say, here, in case you missed the first one,
Yeah.
you know, let's go. And it's pretty brief, and you know, it just says, we're here, we used to be there, we're here, and then the story starts. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And then the idea of returning to it when the big crisis happens and they're broken up and she hates him and all that kind of stuff, which is pretty good. I also noticed that there is, at least in my view, and maybe I'm just bringing the politics of the day in, there are comments about social structure, tribalism, toxic masculinity, you know, all kinds of things that you know, a wall that seem to come from what has happened in the last few years since you guys started the movie. You know? So, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I personally think it's a good thing. But tell me if that influenced you as you developed what was the story into what became the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing is those kind of important elements that feel like it's commenting on our time come from a truthful place where really when you analyze what happens when humans get together, what happens when humans make their own little pack and have different tribes, and all of that none of it was like part of trying to be overly political or overly state things, but that it actually kind of just inherently comes when you explore togetherness and separation. With that said, the idea of say walls, which we purposely put into our movie because walls represent a disconnection or a connection. That idea of walls has become more relevant and timely here in 2020, but it did start from this nugget of an idea which actually started in Croods, the first Croods, where the Croods sleep in a pack. They sleep in a pile. And we loved that there was this warmth that comes from this family bond, that they're always together. And Januel storyboarded an amazing sequence early on, which was kind of guy having to live with almost this small little this small place with the Croods family. And Nate did this amazing painting that which I kept kind of coming back to, which it was a cold, harsh desert and this family sleeping, and there's this warmth that looks like it's emanating from them. So with that kind of nugget, we started out with this exploration of a family that has no walls between them, no personal space, and the positives and negatives of that. And then on the other hand, you meet the Bettermans who have surrounded themselves in a wall and live in this apparent paradise, but have built essentially walls in between themselves as a family.
And I would say we deliberately choose not to be political or very topical, because as you know, Frank, these movies take years. You've pointed out it's been 7 years since we started this. So you could be developing something that felt very topical 2 years ago, and now when the movie comes out, it could have a whole different meaning and maybe be something that wouldn't be cool right now. So I think we don't deliberately kind of lean into those areas, but when you're talking about two families with a dynamic between them, some of these things naturally come up.
Yeah, I agree. If you try and date it too much, then it dates. But
yeah,
teaching animation history, I know that when this shows up in animation history in a few years, then it becomes part of our history.
Yeah,
these things, at the time, the culture was feeling this. These are the things you're talking about are universal. So, and I actually I have first a question with Nate about the wall itself, just because it reminded me of the wall in King Kong, and I wondered if you would have gone back and taken a look at that, the original King Kong, the 33 one.
we
It kind of
looked
looked
at-
like that.
We looked at all things that felt sort of prehistoric-esque, right, in that fun trope. But really the challenge we were more tasked with was, even though it's a cartoon, we wanted a certain amount of believability that this family could build something like that. And so we had some early sketches that was, like these walls were out of stone, which almost kind of felt a little unrealistic. So we tried to look at the materials that were there and thought, well, if they're working, and this was something that like Phil Betterman would say, right? Smarter, not harder. They would sort of build, bamboo planks and then stack those up because those would be lighter. And then we could actually have a 60-foot wall that you could believe a person could lift in pieces and put together. So yeah, we tried to always balance a little bit of cartoon logic, but obviously the playful needs for the viewer experience.
Right. As I was watching it, and I'm a big, there's a lot of adventure scenes when they're riding, the young women are riding along and having a good time, and then there's other scenes at the end, the big climactic scenes with all the cast of thousands and so forth. And I know those are always hard to cinematically do, but for me, as I'm watching it, and I've heard this from live action directors before, the hardest thing to direct is a conversation at the table, where you got to watch your line crossing and all that kind of stuff. And the conversation at the table in this picture is unbelievable. The script is great, and the way it cut across. Was that difficult for you, or was that bing and all done? And
we
it goes to
tortured Daniel
storyboarding
with that.
It goes to storyboarding as well. So it really is smoother than most of the ones I see in any kind of picture. When they got a conversation at the table and there's 7 people in here and it's going to be tough, and you've got all these issues to get across. So how did that get together? Because it's really pretty damn good.
First, I'd like to say, Frank, that I'm glad to hear you validate the bane of my existence during my time in production. But no, and I've said this actually several times through multiple interviews that I think I might have even mentioned in the commentary recorded, which was that was the hardest sequence I've ever had to board in my career thus far, because exactly what you're saying of just tracking all the points of views and all the characters and the continuity. And it was definitely a challenge, but I think it was always like a pivotal sequence we all believed in, and that always, I think, helped carry screenings. And Joel, big props to Joel, because I got stuck a lot, and there were times where I was just like, Joel, I need your help. Can we just sit down and figure this out? And I couldn't have gotten across the finish line without Joel. So
There was
I want to tell you, I haven't seen any of the. I didn't see the commentary. I just watched the movie. I haven't seen any interviews, and I know you've done plenty of them. But it just struck me as a simple viewer watching it, going, "What? Whoa!" It really worked great. So kudos to you guys.
thank you. I think
And Nate, the table looked good too.
I'm going to just give a little shout out to Januel here, and to the art of storyboarding, because the finished film is very, very close to the storyboards. And those storyboards, when you have a sequence that kind of needs help, the storyboards evolve a lot over the show. This sequence is pretty much the first pass, with some edits that Januel did very early in the movie. So that shows the weight of what a great storyboard artist can bring to a movie.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and it works so well with the script. The writing is really tight there. It's not just, the usual watch out and do the things that go in the adventure parts. It brought the whole movie down into this. It was really spectacularly good.
I have to add one thing to that too, is that from a lighting standpoint, we look at a sequence like that and we're like, oh my God, there's 120 shots in here, and how do we not just either have it feel boring? How do we match what Januel and Joel got so well in the boards and in the edit? And we looked for those opportunities and to to make little changes to help progress the story. And it's a subtle thing, but one of our lighters suggested it, which I thought was wonderful, where when the conversation escalates to just Eep and Guy and Grug, they step up and step up like slightly out of the table light, just a little bit. And so the contrast gets a little stronger, and you feel like just in a subtle way, we've raised the stakes of now this is getting a little more emotionally intense, not just the big group.
Right.
And, for Joel to be able to give us those opportunities, it was really it helped us make 120 shots actually feel like a fun path to follow.
Well, I think that guys like Chuck Jones and Maurice Noble and those guys would have loved that sequence. I mean, they had to rely on many fewer shots and didn't have those complicated things, but I think they would have said, look at how far we've come. And they would have been talking not so much about the technology at that point, but the fact that you can do this in a movie.
I wanted to
have it that complex.
I just wanted to give another additional shout out to Nate and his art team, because as you know, like when we're boarding this, we don't have much design. So a lot of it is just like scribbled, oh, this is a generic glass and a modern looking plate and fork and modern food. And then Nate and his team, Pete Zasloff, like had to create these beautiful like Betterman utensils and food and fruit like made out of stone. And then the chandeliers made out of like a Venus flytrap. So it's like, we were thinking of the story and the shots, but then Nate and his team makes it real and inventive.
Yeah,
and yeah.
It's a great example of this sequence is one of my favorite in the movie, because it reminds me of the great collaboration we had from every department. Every department, like you mentioned, we had fantastic writers that brought so much comedy and character. And then the boards brought even more, and then we'd get animation and lighting, and even our voice actors would ad lib, and everything just kept plussing this sequence. And we keep commenting, it's so enjoyable to watch, and it's because everybody's fingerprint is on it in the best way.
And just one additional shout out to our editor Jim Ryan, who kind of partnered with Januel and Joel on this. This was all about rhythm, you know, and he did a great job cutting that as well.
Well, you guys should, and of course, then it just drives the movie forward, and it drives you continually to what's going to happen. You know, they've done all these things, and they've been growing or receding in their growth, and being more guarded or more, and then that just drives the movie right forward. And that's great. It's really great. So it's terrific. Now I want to ask a couple more questions because we don't have a lot of time. First one is music. Now the original picture had Alan Silvestri doing things, and this one had Mark Mothersbaugh doing. And again, it's kind of the thing. It's a sequel, so there's things from the original that come in. But what was Mark's approach, or how did you work with Mark in order to get the music that you wanted?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Alan Silvestri and the first score, but we were looking at this story, the tone of this story, and what could capture really there's a quirkiness that we wanted to exaggerate in this movie, because it's about humans coming together and all of their flaws that make us different, but also funny. And Mark Mothersbaugh captures so much personality in his scores. And is just the most amazing person to work with. He was such a joy, and his whole team. So that already was like, it was a no-brainer for like, okay, this feels right. It was a lot of back and forth with him. Would try things, and then, we'd give notes. He also, by the way, brought in Jack Black to do the final.
That Tenacious D for the old Cowsills song, which I'm going, who thought of that? Which is good. It was a good thing. And then there's a Partridge Family song in there too. And so I thought that it was really a good thing. But was that his idea to put those guys in?
So from the beginning, actually the only sequence I storyboarded, because I'm lazy, is that opening with Guy and Eep where they're in love. And as I storyboarded, I kept listening to that Partridge Family song, I Think I Love You. And it was like, this tells the story. And so that was always in, and we kept trying to beat it, but it always felt like the right way to show not just the story of Eep and Guy's love, but also the story that evolves with the two families and their love. We call it the bromance between Grug and Phil.
Right, the banana bromance. Pretty great. And now I have one other question, because we only have a minute or two to go, and this is a good one. What was the biggest crash and burn, Mark? And what was the biggest breakthrough, Joel, or any of you guys? The biggest crash and burn, biggest breakthrough.
I'll jump through with a breakthrough again, because we start so much of this movie with storyboards. There were a couple of sequences boarded early on, and I'm going to, again, Januel's getting lots of shout outs, but the sequence with the sleep pile, that gave a tone and a humor, which I thought there was a warmth from that sequence, which kind of we lent into for the rest of the movie. So there's a breakthrough moment on the movie.
Can I add one more breakthrough before we get into the crash and burns? The early on when we approached the script, it was in the script there was already another family they met, and there were two girls meeting, and they in that version of the script, the two girls, Eep and the other girl, were jealous of each other. And one of the early decisions we made was like, each character needs to be coming from a positive place. We wanted, and we looked at realistically what would happen when a girl who doesn't come across anyone else sees another girl her age. And it felt like the honest thing and the fun thing is she sees an instant best friends, and so much comedy and positivity came from Eep and Dawn's relationship that was an early breakthrough that I think led the tone of the movie.
Yeah, nice conversation about scars. Scars too. That was pretty great. So, Nate, you got one that's a crash and burn or a breakthrough?
No, I mean, I think I don't know that it's necessarily a breakthrough, but I feel like we paid on the promise of taking a world that had been established and improved on it for a sequel, the way that you would hope to. That, you know, everything advanced, the animation got stronger, the lighting, the color, the world itself was even that much more tactile. And that's a hard thing to do when you already have a really high bar with what the first movie was. So
yeah, you always have that sequel problem. They're going to compare it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So I got a crash and burn.
Okay, go for it.
You know, the banana runner through like the movie. So it actually went as far as we created a banana character called Banana Man that Wragg envisioned in his head. And we even had like Ryan, one of our production people, like give a voice. And it was this really, at the time we thought it was like hilarious, like this really high pitched, like Brady, like voice when he's talking to Grud. We're like, this is hilarious. We're going to play this. It's going to be so funny. We played it in the screening and it was dead quiet. And it felt like that minute joke lasted for like 5 minutes. And we're like, I guess Banana Man's out the movie.
Banana Man's out. No more Banana Man.
I will give you the biggest crash and burn, which is an obvious one, but coronavirus was a crash and burn for everybody in the animation industry, that we all stopped hanging out together and starting having to work from home. Of course, like all the animation industry, there you go. We were better equipped than most to get up and running, and thank God for technology and amazing technicians and TDs who enabled us within a week to be back in meetings and animating and keeping this movie going, because we had an end date like all the shows in production. And so that 2020 is going to be the crash and burn Corona year.
But ends with a positive, ends with I think a positive outcome, which it was like this. We were only halfway done with the movie when everybody went to work from home, and it was awesome seeing, and made me appreciate our amazing, talented team of over 300 people that came together, finished the movie, and it looks amazing on the big screen. It doesn't look like a pandemic movie.
No,
you wouldn't know it was a pandemic during it.
No, it was released streaming. So did it have any theatrical release at all?
Yeah, so we're currently, as we speak, we're in a 3-week theatrical run. And of course, a lot of the country isn't open for theaters, but we're about to go streaming on December 18th.
Great. Okay, guys. Well, it's a terrific movie. I loved it. I'm sure that everybody who sees it's going to love it. I'm sure that I'm positive that whatever, comparing it to the other one will only be positive. I think this movie stands well on its own, and it's pretty great. So kudos to you guys. Thank you for being here with us, Joel, Mark, Nate, and Januel. I did get good.
Thank you, Frank.
I appreciate it very much, and I think we got to say goodbye now. So if you don't mind.
Thank you, Frank.
All right. Well, thank you,
Goodbye.
Frank.
Yeah.
Bye-bye,
See
everybody.
you all.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks, ASIFA.